Welcome back to the live stream. I'm having technical difficulties. Don't even know if my mic's working, but I'm going to review another video today. Is the Bank of England's central bank going broke? Find out next.
You are now relearning economics.
Welcome back to the live stream. What a morning. Woke up, found out my mic software wasn't working. I still can't find it. I've tried to reinstall it on my Windows operating system. And I don't even know if the mic is sounding good. Guess I can do some tests here. This is a tough part about being live. Seems like my mic is doing something. But you know what? Doesn't matter. There's nothing I can do right now. We're on the fly. We're live. Live with relearning economics. I've got a video. A lot of people have asked me to review it. And it's on the Bank of England. So the Central Bank of England. And this guy is postulating that, you know, some things are happening and essentially the bank is going broke. It's going to be hugely problematic for the government. Yada, yada, yada. So I thought I'd do that. Make sure you say hi in the chat, hit that like button, subscribe button, notification bell so you know when my videos start, and leave some comments in the live chat or leave them underneath the video in the comments. That helps too. I always read them. I'll even heart them if I don't like them, but if I don't reply to them, it's probably because I don't like them. But if you say something nice, I might reply to them. I'm pretty biased that way. If you're on X, you can do all the same things, or you can just come over here and say hello. I hope my mic does okay today. I'll have to rectify the problem after the live stream. Colin, greetings from New York, the Big Apple. How you doing, Colin? Tony Wilson's in the house. The Bank of England can't go broke, but the British nation can because it's got two main parts, the administration and the population. Interesting comments, Mr. Jenkinson. Plenty of gold in the vault, boys. Never in doubt. All right, well then I think we should just get right into this video. See what's going on in it.
Now, normally when we talk about the Bank of England, we talk about interest rates. Same with all these central banks. That's the famous thing that they change in order to try and influence what's going on with the economy. This is what happened in recent years to Bank of England interest rates. Look, they were rock bottom through the financial crisis, went down a little bit further actually in COVID and after the Brexit referendum. And then they went up to 5.25%, and they've come down recently. So they're at 4%, and you know the latest decision from the bank is to leave them on hold. But that's not what I want to talk about. Actually, I want to talk about something.
I always take a British accent really seriously, so I'm already enthralled by this video.
I want to talk about something which is potentially an even bigger deal than this, affects all of us, involves enormous sums of money, might have an impact on Rachel Reeves's budget, but very few people are talking about this, partly because it's really complicated. But I'm going to try my best to just kind of draw you through this, because what we're talking about here,
the established authority is going to try to draw you through this,
is quantitative easing. Now,
oh no,
QE
quantitative easing.
It's a terrible name, I know, but you know what can you do? QE was this system, this scheme which the Bank of England did, and other central banks around the world, during the financial crisis. Basically, because interest rates were rock bottom, that was down near zero, they decided there must be some other.
Now, isn't Sky News, that's the Australian kind of right-leaning news organization? Am I correct by that? I've seen their YouTube videos around, and they seem very, very pro certain people.
You can do to try and push loads of money out into the economy and just get all of the interest rates that the rest of us are paying down. It was a crisis era thing. And so what they did was they ended up electronically creating money, so basically printing money electronically, and then buying up a load of assets. And it's just a way of getting money out there. And it so happens in the bank's case, they mostly bought government bonds, the UK government bonds. They just said that's the main thing that's out there.
So quantitative easing is not much different than open market operations by a central bank. Generally, in traditional market operations, the central bank is creating reserves for commercial banks that hold short-term government securities. They'll purchase those government securities and the banks get these newly created reserves. With quantitative easing, they started going to the long end of government securities and even some corporate bonds, right? So they would create reserves, settlement balances, and they would purchase longer end duration government yields. And of course, this is it really was introduced in a period where rates were already at zero at the low end. So for the policy rate, and then the treasuries rate, government security bonds rate yield for low end yields, short term yields was really low as well. So they started going and basically controlling the yield curve. That's quantitative easing. So not much different from open market operations, just, on steroids.
That's the main thing that's out there. So we're going to buy lots of it. And when I say lots of it, it was an incredible amount. It got to the peak, it got to 895 billion pounds. I worked out a few years ago that you were talking about, for that amount, you could buy every property in Scotland. Everything. But instead of their spending it on property, they spent it on these government bonds that no one spends much time thinking about outside of the city. And so no one quite noticed it. But it was a big deal. And here's why we need to talk about this now.
I don't know what this guy was talking about. Everybody was talking about quantitative easing in 2009. Maybe nobody, the general public didn't quite understand what quantitative easing was. Pretty big fancy word, but people were talking about it.
They've started to sell that off. So gradually, in recent months and years, they have been reducing the balance sheet, selling off those bonds and bringing that down. And here is why.
So the reverse happens when the central bank, when it sells its security assets, the ones that it owns, government security assets, it's then withdrawing reserves from the commercial bank system, and they disappear, right? The central bank just marks them down. They no longer exist, and then the security assets become, the commercial banks again.
Here is why this matters. I'm going to give you a little example of one of the bonds that they bought within this program and what happened.
I don't know about that, Mr. Jenkinson. From what I've watched of Sky News, they seem to lean a certain way.
Happened to it, okay? It's a 2061 bond, okay? Just one of, if you think about them buying thousands and thousands of things with this printed money, this is one of them. And the bank bought it at £101. And look at what happened to the price afterwards, and look at where they sold it. So that's where they sold it, at £28. And, it doesn't take a financial expert to look, 101 over there, 28 over there.
Okay, so what he's describing right now is bonds on the open market. They will trade and they'll fluctuate in price. And of course, so let's say, just so anybody that doesn't know how bonds work, let's say the primary auction is $100 bond, and it goes out into the secondary market and it gets traded around and it drops in price down to $90. That gap between its par price and its market price is your yield. So it's a 10% yield, right? That's what he's talking about here. And what he's saying is the central bank purchased all these bonds, let's say at $100, and then sold them at $26 back years later at a huge loss for the central bank. But if you think about it, the central bank just creates the reserve, so it's no loss to them. It's just something they fabricated, and all that's happened is they've left more, in this case, the pound, they've left more pounds in the commercial banking system. So they injected a certain amount of pounds initially for these long-term government bonds. And then later on, they were like, okay, now we're going to sell those bonds back, and we're going to take the money back, but we're selling the bonds at a huge discount. And so actually you're going to get the bonds back, and you're going to keep a little bit of your balances at the central bank. He'll probably describe this as some big money losing operation, I'm sure.
That's a big loss. You're buying high and you're selling low, 73% loss. So this is just one of the examples of what's been going on.
Huge loss. It's I don't want to sound like a modern monetary theorist here, but basically they are literally the banker in the game of Monopoly. Literally, absolutely. There's no denying. No school of thought denies that. So they can't lose anything, right? They make it.
Going on in a nutshell. And if you imagine that extrapolated across this £895 billion, then you have a sense of it. This is kind of giving you a sense. This is across the gilts market, what's been going on and where they were buying. So they bought there, they bought there, they bought there. This was during the financial crisis. That was after the EU referendum. Then they bought again, really very much at the top during COVID. A lot of money, £440 billion at that point. And then here they're selling. And that selling is continuing. And again, look at the chart. You get a sense, you know.
I'm looking at the chart. So if I wasn't the currency issuer of a nation, this would be really problematic, right? So I bought really high and I sold really low and I lost money. But if I could just create money, it wouldn't matter. It just wouldn't freaking matter. Like, you got to remember that this is what bond vigilantes really hate. The central bank of a nation sets the market for treasuries. It is the ultimate market maker. It will go in, it can manipulate the yields of bonds, whether short or long, at any given time if it wants. And a lot of people are saying, oh, long bonds are going up right now in Britain or the UK or England or Wales or Scotland, whatever you guys want to call yourselves. Alex, are you a UKer? I don't know what term I should use for you guys. I don't want to get in trouble here. I don't want to get canceled. But they can go in and they can purchase whatever they want. That's their market. Hell, they even run the initial auctions, right? So what this guy is probably going to allude to is that the central bank is going broke. We'll find out here. Let's see what he says.
Sense, you know, these numbers are high, that one's low, the bank is selling at those points. And it's doubly an issue for the Bank of England compared with other central banks. Like I say, other central banks around the world are doing a similar thing. It's just showing you the
it's doubly the issue. It's not an issue. It's normal central bank operations. Central banks make fiat money that turns up as reserves for commercial banks. That's what they do, and they will add or subtract to it to target an interest rate. And then they'll create these other little fictional things called interest on reserves and discount window loans, right? And you create a little channel and your policy rate floats in between based on your open market operations, because the central bank makes the market for those interest rates.
The share of their kind of government bond markets that they've been buying up, whether it's the Fed, that's the US central bank, that's the purple, the dark blue is the ECB. Here's the key thing.
Frank, hope you watch it later. Leave a comment, Frank, underneath the video. Let me know what you think of my analysis and his analysis. Let me know. I'm too bad you can't be here live, but hopefully you watch it later. Aaron's around. I saw you in the last couple streams. Hey, Ty, damn, I missed the start. So pleased you decided to take on Ed's. I don't even know who this Ed guy is. A lot of people actually on Twitter, X, told me, hey, can you do this video? Can you do this video? It's kind of short. And I said, well, okay. I don't know how interesting it's going to be, but so far this guy's turned into a complete idiot. We'll carry on, though.
Here's the key thing. Look at the Bank of England. I'll bring that on in red. You can see they bought a greater proportion of government bonds than the others. And look at that line coming down even more sharply than the others. Now, all of this is going to make sense in a second, but what I'm going to kind of point out is the latest thing that's happening is they've said, look, we're going to slow down the rate at which we're bringing down that line. We're going to slow it down. And
let's just go back to that line, just so everybody knows. This is the holdings of long-term government securities by central banks, different central banks around the world. So you got the ECB there, the Bank of England, and the Federal Reserve. And what he's showing is the Bank of England as a percent of government, securities held by the central bank. They're the largest holders, which means as a ratio, they've really stimulated their interbank market, with QE over the years. And of course, that's a whole nother story. What was QE supposed to do? And of course, the traditional explanation, it was to get banks to lend to private sector individuals. But then you've got the hangover of a loanable funds model, which we know is not true, right? And it turns out it didn't stimulate any lending to private sector non-bank individuals at all. You could just look at the 2010s, low growth, low inflation, moderate unemployment for a decade of QE.
Thing that's happening is they've said, look, we're going to slow down the rate at which we're bringing down that line. We're going to slow it down. And so this is just another way of showing that. This is how much they've been selling in recent years, these taller bars, £100 billion a year. The light blue thing is just, those were some corporate bonds. The dark blue bits is the stuff that...
As for all the critiques I have on MMT and some behavioral economics and politics and maybe being politically naive at points, this is like hits at the heart of MMT. So what he's saying is using terminology like the central bank is a market participant like you or I. What he's essentially saying is that the central bank is massively slowing down, the Bank of England, the amount of currency creation as reserve accounts at commercial banks in the country of Britain, Wales, Scotland, Ireland. What's the other one? Alex? There's a few other ones. But anyways, that's what he's essentially saying, but he's not framing it that way. And so we get this neoliberal continuation of the story. We'll carry on, see if he's got something
anyway.
good.
So if you did nothing, it would automatically kind of go off into the market. But these kind of royal blue segments are the active extra sales they've been doing. Like I say,
this is a decent guy, Ty. He understands the Bank of England won't go bust. I watch him sometimes. Well, this is the first time I've watched him. He's not, it's like going on a blind date. He is not leaving a good first impression. Like, there's probably not going to be a second date for me, Alex. So I hope he says something really, really, really good that hooks me in. So I check out some of this other material where I find out he knows the Bank of England won't go bust.
In there, buying something at 101, selling it at £28 billion. They didn't have to do that. That was an active sale. And what they've said is, instead of keeping this at 100 billion in the next few years, it's going to be 70 billion next year. So some people would look at this and say,
okay, side note, let's get this straight here. In the UK, you have England, Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, plus Gibraltar, and some tax havens. So that's all considered the United Kingdom. What is Britain? Like, is Britain the name of a country? Is that like a sub of the UK? And then within Britain, you have Wales, Scotland, and the other ones. I'm always curious about that. I guess I could look it up, but I just didn't see the point in my life of really learning that about England. And I want to say England for some reason. Interesting. Side note, maybe Alex, you can break that down for me so I get a better understanding.
Say, well, this is a bit of a concession that what's happened here hasn't gone exactly how we planned, and we're kind of reducing the amount. Others would, particularly the bank, would say, well, this was always part of our plan.
Did you guys hear what the plan was, though, other than the central bank is clearly withdrawing reserves from the commercial banks system by selling back some of these long-term treasuries at spot? What's the long-term plan, Ed? Ed, give me some hope here. Give me that second date. That's all I ask for. I want to give you a chance. Okay? Alex says you're a good guy. Okay? And I like Alex. And if Alex says you're good, then prove to me that you're good.
Part of our plan. But have a look at this. This is showing you the total impact of this. And you kind of probably have the idea of this by now. The bank buying a lot of things very expensive, selling it pretty cheap. Every other central bank around the world has been doing something along these lines. But the point is the Bank of England has been doing it.
Okay. So Britain is excluding Ireland then, right? Whether it's Northern Ireland or proper Ireland. I know there's that whole political dynamic going on there. So Britain is just the big island. The UK is Ireland, or Ireland, not Northern Ireland, and the big island with all its countries. Whoo! That is technical stuff there. You got a British flag, the British Parliament. You got the British so Britain is the country. What is Wales then? Like, what is Wales in England? Are they like just states? Like in the US, you've got your states, or Canada, you've got your provinces. Is that kind of what it's like down in or across from me in the Britain?
Shit's
technical.
Quantities. This is showing you how much the Federal Reserve is projected to lose in the coming years as a result of reversing quantitative easing. This is showing you European central banks, so losing 3% of GDP. Look at what the Bank of England is projected to
lose. What did I miss here? Hold on. What did I miss?
So selling it pretty cheap. Every other central bank around the world has been doing something along these lines. But the point is the Bank of England has been doing it in greater quantities. This is showing you how much the Federal Reserve is projected to lose in the coming years as a result of reversing quantitative easing.
Losing what? It's not, it's programs as a percent of GDP. It doesn't say GDP is going down. It's just saying he's going back to the central bank is losing money because they're unwinding and selling these treasuries at a loss. Oh, Ed, the second date, man, it is in big jeopardy right now.
This is showing you European central banks, so losing 3% of GDP. Look at what the Bank of England is projected to lose in the coming years. 5.4% of GDP. Now, these numbers are...
The Bank of England isn't competing for GDP. It just simply manages the reserve balances of commercial banks and targets an interest rate. Oh, Ed, Alex, I don't know. Alex, maybe in the comments underneath the video, you can put a link to one of his good videos. So I can see him on his best day, because this is like going on a date with a individual that got out of bed, didn't wash his armpits, didn't wash other things, right? And then I have to smell them during dinner. Now, an Italian dinner, right, with some strong cheese, I guess you can, get around that. I don't know where these metaphors are going. They're getting pretty dark if you think about it. But anyways, I don't know about this Ed guy.
Really complex. It's very hard to do these sums. These have been done by an analyst at Columbia Threadneedle, and there are certainly some question marks people would have over them, particularly at the bank. But even so, the Office of Budget Responsibility says this programme that very few people ever talk about is projected to lose £134 billion worth of...
So let's make this perfectly clear in the sequence of events here. The central bank, and we'll just summarize in generality, it doesn't even have to be just the Bank of England. The central bank decides it wants to go into the commercial bank market of treasuries. Could be long, it could be short. So it could be QE, it could be just normal open market operations. And it's going to buy a certain amount of securities, government securities. It conjures up the reserves out of nothing, because that's what it does. It's a currency issue, or it's, a arm of the government. Those reserves go into the accounts that commercial banks hold with the central bank, and in exchange, the commercial banks give up an asset, which is a government security, and then the central bank holds it. When they unwind these programs, the reverse happens. So the reserves disappear, and the commercial banks get the treasuries. What this guy is saying here, Ed, our buddy Ed, is that because the commercial or central bank bought the government security at $100 and is now selling at $20, let's say, that they are making a huge loss. The question is how can you lose if you're the currency issuer? That does not make sense. There is no loss to incur. It's all their money on those accounts that commercial banks hold are on account with the central bank. They haven't lost anything. Woo! What a morning. You know, my audio's screwing up, and then I've got Ed.
Pounds worth of taxpayers' money. 134 billion pounds. But like I say, others have different views on it.
Graham, welcome to the chat. I'm glad you're here. Glad to see you. British Central Bank is for England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland. Okay, so Northern Ireland. What's the part? So it's the proper island that still wants to be part of the European Union. There's a lot of confusing political dynamics in the UK. I'm going to tell you that. Let's check out some of the chat here. As a Canadian, I can't trust a man wearing a sweater in September. Colin, as a Canadian, I second that opinion. Alex, a supporter of Ed. Ed has a good point, though, that it is a massive waste of money. But where is it getting wasted? Nuance that more, and I'll have a small debate with you. Best from X. He's on X. The City of London has invested more in speculations than on real productivities. Like the city, the municipality, London? Or is that like a general term, like London finance? Aaron, well, of course, you know, it's always going to be fun. If I don't have a video of Ed, we can just make fun of me, right? So don't worry. The fun is always going to be here. Let's carry on with Ed and his description of this big, extremely frightening loss of the Bank of England.
He's on it, and actually I talked just earlier today to the Bank of England governor, and here are the provisos he adds to this.
During quite a long period when we had interest rates down near zero, we had quantitative easing.
During the long period of rates, we had quantitative easing. As you may or may not know, because you do not hold the intellectual standard of a banker like me, that is when we were doing exactly what Ty described throughout this live stream.
A lot of benefit was gained from this. It was cheaper to issue government debt and to issue long-term government debt. And the benefits of this will go on for a long time. So those numbers that you quote don't take that into account.
So the point here is to say.
Okay, I was busy making fun of this. I guess he's the central bank head in the UK for you guys. I just got to listen to him again. I don't want to miss anything. I want to know exactly what he said.
134 billion pounds. But like I say, others have different views on it. And actually, I talked just earlier today to the Bank of England governor, and here are the provisos he adds to this.
During quite a long period when we had interest rates down near zero, we had quantitative easing. A lot of benefit was gained from this. It was cheaper to issue government debt and to issue long-term government debt. And the benefits of this will go on for a long time. So those numbers that you quote don't take that into account.
Okay, so he's saying that one of the benefits was driving all rates down. So with quantitative easing, remember how I said that the Bank of England was buying long-term government securities. So they're driving the yields, right? Pushing the value of those securities up, driving the yields down, and made it cheaper for the government to issue long-term debt. That was a true benefit. So what he's saying there is correct. I'm glad he didn't go into, and also we had the hope that commercial banks would then lend out these reserves to the public that does not have accounts with us. Somehow they would just take out wheelbarrows full of notes, physical notes, and purchase houses with them. He didn't say that, so that's a good thing.
So the point here is to say, listen, even if this was expensive, even if we spent more than many other people that are out there, first of all, it's complicated. And secondly, what would have happened if QE hadn't have happened? Maybe there would have been even more of a crisis. Unemployment would have been higher. So, it's not straightforward. But even so, this is something.
Okay, don't go but. He's about to do the but. I guess British people say, even so. Alex, you're British, right? So I hope I'm not offending you. Canadians, we drink too much beer. We have a lot of maple syrup. We fight our wars with hockey sticks. We have a lot of deficiencies too. So I am not just picking on Britain, but I will pick on in this case. Cheerio, mate. Cheerio. Cup of tea. Cup of tea with some biscuits. What he was saying there is he's saying, yeah, well, imagine if we didn't do quantitative easing, the crisis could have been a lot worse. If you look back to the financial crisis, which really has its roots in the United States, you had massive private sector debt, right? Private sector debt, you become heavily leveraged, right? And this goes back to the whole Hyman-Minsky instability hypothesis. You can model this out. Steve loves doing these models, right? And so you have this long period of great moderation, right? As private debt increases and government debt may be going down. And then, bam, you get instability in the system. I could play this model out for you guys after this video. We can look at that. And so the idea is we hit that instability part. And the answer from central banks is, well, QE. We're going to inject mass amounts of reserves into the system and see what happens. Now, one of the goals, obviously, was to lower the longer end yields. You got to remember the 10-year yield in most countries is like the benchmark for home mortgages, right? So if you lower that yield, right, the 10-year yield, then you theoretically should be lowering mortgage yields to the private sectors. But then there's the other side of it that I don't think every central banker thought this, but there had to been the uneducated ones out there that literally thought, look at, we are putting this money into the hands of commercial banks. They're going to have all these extra reserves. They're going to want to lend them out. They're excess reserves. And that part never happened, right? So that's a separate subject, but it does prove that in aggregate, money creation is driven by the demand for a loan, not the amount of reserves that a commercial bank has. And this goes against, the fractional reserve bank theory people and the Austrians, etc. It really goes against that because from their perspective, reserve balances drive loan creation. So if you have more reserve balances, then in theory, you'll have more money creation, commercial bank creation. But in all my modeling and my statistical analysis, that doesn't seem to be the case. And it really is the reverse. So commercial bank lending, which corresponds to real economic activity, drives the need for more reserve balances. The Fed or any central bank will then step in and go into the market and buy government securities and then provide those reserves for commercial banks to then settle all the economic activity after the fact.
So this is something we all need to be talking about. And I'm going to show you just one other final chart, which perhaps underlines it. Okay, this is showing you, there's been so much talk
Good
recently,
evening.
hasn't there, about how high you...
Okay, so if you're a YouTube channel for all, I'm glad you're very inclusive. So you must be Europe or Britain too. Are you from Britain? Because we're having a sub-conversation about the different regions of Britain, which I'll get into after this video ends, because we could have made a whole live stream about the different parts of England. Maybe next week. Maybe that's what we're doing.
UK government borrowing rates are, gilt yields, particularly the long-dated stuff, so 30-year gilt yields, how high they are in the UK versus other countries around the world. This is showing you the UK, that's the red line, and the US, dark blue line, just from 2017 through to 2022. And you can see that the lines are basically more or less in line with each other, aren't they? Then quantitative easing comes to an end. And look at what happens next. Look at the red line versus the blue line. That UK line diverges big time. It diverges big time.
We went through this at the very beginning, how yields work, right? So if the Bank of England is unwinding QE faster than the Federal Reserve, that means it's pumping back more of these treasuries into the market, driving the price down and increasing their yield. That's just simple mechanics there. That's mechanical monetary operations 101. I should write a textbook over it, right? So nothing really fancy here. Let's see how he explains
Just
it.
big time. And basically borrowing gets more expensive in the UK after QE comes to an end and it starts selling off these assets.
But if the government, the UK, Britain government, Britain Parliament, I still haven't figured that out. If they're borrowing and they are essentially the sole owner of the Bank of England, I don't know how it's structured there, but essentially they are. They're borrowing from themselves. And if their little arm, the Bank of England, holds those notes, those guilds, you call them there, we'll just say government securities, to maturity, they just pay the interest out to them, and then the BOE, after bank operations, returns the profits back to the treasury. That's not a big deal. If it's owned by the private sector, that means they're paying interest into the private sector via the Bank of England, and the private sector is getting net savings. If the government doesn't like those net savings, it just boosts taxes a little more. Like, it's pretty like mechanical. When you get into the private sector, there are behavioral dynamics. And so Alex will like me. This is why Alex probably watches me, because I think he's a trader too. And so am I. There are behavioral dynamics where the market is really steering the way a service, or a financial asset's going. But when it comes to like monetary economics at that high level, it's just a circle jerk. Okay? I'm not monetized yet, so I can do this. It's just a circle jerk, right? Between commercial banks, the central bank, and the treasury, right? And it's all very mechanical. And you're seeing it in these graphs here. So you can see quantitative easing is unwinding a lot faster than it is in the US for Britain. And you can see the yields are rising faster. And you can see the little tiny squiggly lines there. That is market participation. So it does the little squiggly lines, but the overall market is carried by what the BOE does.
These assets. And this is why this is a really big deal, not just for all of us because it affects our pockets, but also for the Chancellor, because right now she's having to contend with, lo and behold, higher interest rates. And so questions are being asked about whether that was the right move. But the final...
So what? All that happens is if the chancellor wants to spend, and they're going to do it by offsetting via deficit spending, so they're going to release treasuries and whatnot, they can do that, because guess who's going to support that all the way through that process? The BOE. The BOE will go into commercial bank markets where the primary dealers live, who are participate in the auctions, right? It's settled through reserve accounts, not through commercial bank money. We've been through this a few weeks ago, right? The central bank just steps in, gives the banks enough reserves to participate in these auctions, right? Steps in, right? The government sees, okay, we're going to have to pay more interest. We're going to have to release more notes or treasuries in the future. Don't worry. The central bank just steps into the commercial bank market, gives them the reserves in exchange for old government securities, and the system just goes on, right? There's no problem there. The problem obviously will always come down, and I don't want to sound like Milton Friedman here, but if you're just pumping in a bunch of money into the system, right? Beyond goods and services, it's going to be inflationary. And we all know that. That's textbook Econ 101, right? There's always that problem, right? So then it goes into the question, what's your prime minister there? You guys go through so many. Liz Truss, is she still in or is she out? Who's your prime minister there right now? It was Skidoo. Who's Skidoo? Who the hell is the PM in Britain right now? You guys got so many. I like the guy with the crazy hair, like the Trump Jr. there, but he's long gone. And there's been a bunch there. But anyways, whoever your PM is, it don't matter, right? They're just a cog in the chain, really. It really comes down to them and their government. Are they injecting money into the government that's productive, right? So if the society thinks that good health care is productive, then it's productive. That's what you guys want, good health care. That's what we like in Canada, right? Starmer. Okay, sorry guys. I keep up on economics, not so much politics. Thank you for that clarification. You guys go through so many over there. It's really divisive there, right? Canada could fall in that trap too. We have a parliamentary system there, much like the British system. And we've come close, and we're sitting with a lot of minority governments right now. And so we're close to having that problem, but there's here in Canada, we essentially have three dominant parties. So we have the NDP, very socialist, left-leaning. We have the Liberals that I think most people would agree they're down the center. And then we have the Conservatives, and the Conservatives are facing an identity crisis. They don't know if they want to be really right-wing or should they come to the center so they can actually compete with the Liberals, because the Liberals win the majority of the elections. And the last election is an example of going to the default. But that's another story. Let's finish this video off here.
Final thing I want to mention, sorry, it's been, relatively long, but as I say, this is really important.
Oh, it's okay, Ed. This has been a master class in me disagreeing with Alex. I will never watch you again.
Really important, even if it is a bit complicated. What was the other thing that happened at that point when QE came to an end?
An end.
It was the mini budget. That was when Liz Truss came along and said,
Liz Truss. So didn't she last for like 20 days or so? Jesus, that's crazy.
Take things in a different direction, at least she did for a little bit. And so there's an alternative view that says maybe the divergence of these lines was a bit about the Bank of England, but maybe it was even more about people losing faith.
No, it's don't... Alex, do you see what he's doing there? Alex, you know goddamn well as much as I know, that is completely the BOE diverging those lines there by unwinding faster than the US. And he's trying to add in a little bit of bond vigilante bullshit right there. Well, maybe it's a little bit about people losing trust. Trust me, if the BOE stepped in and just started buying long treasuries, that would drop like a rock, that yield. It would drop like a rock. And we saw it. He laid out the facts along the way.
In the UK and in its fiscal policy making. So I imagine economists will, for decades to come, be debating the different explanations for this.
Yeah, because economists are stupid. I'm not an economist, by the way. I put it in my monarch thing. A lot of heterodox economists like me because, I'm famous with my national model, which isn't famous in the mainstream world. And I love economics. I love how the system works. But I will not be debating this for years to come. I see it right there for what it is. It's not a mystery. There's no scientific experiments to be performed. It is just a mechanical operation, right? You can test this in a mechanical system, like a causal system. Use system dynamics. Use agent-based modeling. Use what you want. Go to frickin' Tony Wilson, who's in the chat. Tony, you tell him too. This is a simple experiment you can perform.
For this. But all the same, that is the situation we're faced with right now. And that's why when we're thinking about the Bank of England, don't just think about interest rates. Think about that techie stuff as well.
Think about that techie stuff as well. Woo! What? What? I don't know how my mic is doing. It might be like really hard today because I lost my streaming software. So I apologize for that. Chat, how are you doing? What did you guys think of Ed? Give me an honest opinion here. I could put a poll. I tried to do a poll last week and I did it too late in the show and it didn't get a lot. Do you like Ed? Right? Let's do that poll right now. Let's just do it. Hold on. Stand by. I got to go into... Fortunately, my ex-viewers, you can't actually participate in this poll, but my YouTube viewers can. Let's go right to this poll now. Give me a second here. So let's do this. Add a poll. We're going to make this. Do you like Ed? Yes or no? So we'll get that poll going. See how you people think. What do you think about Ed? If you were a woman, do we have any women in the chat right now? This seems to be a very man's chat. We got more women in the, Mr. Keynes and Dr. Keynes live stream on Friday, which will be back Friday. Steve will be with us, so look out for that. Same time, 6 p.m. London time, 1 p.m. New York time, 10 p.m. Pacific time on my coast, California, LA, California, city of Compton. I like Ed. Well, we know Ed's got 1 vote so far. We're looking at it. Oh, it's pretty balanced so far. We've got 57% saying no, 43% saying yes. Very interesting. We have some yes people for Ed. If we get more than 50% in this poll, I will watch another Ed video for Alex, because I like Alex. Alex here, he's open-minded. And here's the thing. I like open-minded people. This is why I engage with the Bob Murphys out there, the Jonathan Newmans. You'll see it on my X account. I like open dialogue. I like different opinions. I may not agree with them, but if you can engage, joke around, have some fun with it, I really like that. That's like my favorite part of intellectual debating, right? Is not just being in your echo chamber, but being able to communicate with people you don't always agree with. Alex, that's why I like Alex here, right? Insightful comments. I may not always agree with them. Sure as hell, I'm not liking Ed yet, Alex. You haven't proven me on that. But anyways, we'll see. If it gets to 50%, no, it's up to 70% now. 70 to 30%. I don't know if I'll be watching another Ed video. But did you guys understand all that? How essentially it mechanically the securities market. So, the government just creates these securities. The central bank creates the reserves. So it's just a creature of them. They make that market, right? As a private sector individual, a non-bank individual, you have the opportunity to exchange your non-interest earning dollars in for interest earning treasuries. That is the luxury you get, but you do not make the market, right? There is no such thing as bond vigilantes and stuff, because the central bank can come in and swamp the market either way, because it's issuing the currency. Right? That's the reality of it. And this was kind of like almost an exercise in showing that, right? Okay, Rich, what do we got here? What are you saying? Ed's book, Material World, is a good book, telling monetary operations as it isn't permitted on MSN. What's MSN? Is that like Microsoft Word? Spreadsheet? I don't know what MSN is. Interesting. He has a book, so if you guys are interested in Ed's views, he has a book called Material World. check it out. I have so many books that I've ordered from Amazon. I could have bought a second house, I think. At least a big portion of a down payment for a second house. Out of all the books I've bought and I have not read. So I won't be buying Ed's book. I haven't been convinced yet. Alex, you haven't convinced me yet. You haven't convinced me. Let's see how that poll's doing. It's still at 70%. It's not looking good. I'm following the masses here. Mainstream media. Okay. Jeez. I'm not up with the Gen Z. Are you a Gen Z or Rich? With all these acronyms. Tony. Hey, Ty. Hey, Tony. If we are going to have another discussion like this, can you please get Mark Blythe on to properly discuss? I think I laid it out just fine. I don't need Mark. I'm sure Mark's got on YouTube. You can go listen to Mark. I don't need Mark on my YouTube channel. It's not going to help me any, right? I've had all those people on before. Hasn't helped my YouTube channel. So, hey, you can go talk to Mark, though, about quantitative easing. It's pretty simple, right? BOE steps in, buys long-term treasuries in exchange for created reserves. And that happens between the central bank and commercial banks. What does that do? Drives yields down on long-term securities. That's what it is, right? Nothing more, nothing less. What are reserves used for? To settle economic activity between banks. That's all it is. Nothing more, nothing less. Mainstream media, eh? MSN. I've seen that a lot. And I thought everybody was talking to, like, remember MSN? Remember MSN Messenger, if you're old enough? And that was the way we live chat it to each other. And, you know, there was Yahoo Messenger, MSN Messenger. That's what I thought it meant. Rich, you taught me something new today, buddy. Thank you. Appreciate that. Graham, putting out his strong opinions about neoliberalism. Got it? Ty, Mark wrote a book, Austerity, The History of a Bad Idea. I think I've heard of it. I haven't read it, though. The Bank of England keeping interest rates around 5% benefits the bondholders, right? Well, it depends what kind of market strategy you're using. So Alex would know a lot about this. I might just be trading treasuries, right? And if that's the case, I'm just looking for, buying the treasury low and selling it high. I don't care about the yield. The yield's just the inverse of that. So, like, if you're a long-term holder of bonds, sure, it can be beneficial to you. And you could say, well, then that's benefiting the wealthy people of a country. And there's other methods to deal with that. That gets into, like, what we've talked about a lot in the past. So a lot of the progressive MMT crowd says, well, let's just do away. I got a spider. It's a little small spider. Just crushed it. I killed the spider. Let's just do away with government securities. The government can just issue money. Now, of course, it's problematic. How do you control, like, a politician not just having a huge spending plan? Everybody's spending bills would just go through the roof, right? And then you're chasing too few goods with a lot of money. But the other aspect of it is, even if they're ending up into the hands of the rich, they do actually help the average person, right? It's part of your retirement plan. These securities are held there, right? And it's a risk-free security, right? It's the safest security there is in a country. And if you eliminate that, then you leave the free market to create these safe securities. And then you look at 2008. So it's true, like, they end up in the hands of the rich. You could use a tax scheme to deal with that pretty easily if you wanted to, but that's a whole nother story too. I could do a whole live stream on that. Alex, he's going to say something about, I use bonds at 5% because you can keep your cash ready to buy stocks after the crash, but collect 5% while you wait. I'm not a day trader. I'm a trader of the boom and bust. So are you more of a swing type trader? So you're more in the medium term business cycle trader? You kind of rotate between like fixed assets and equities. I've thought about like having a different regime, like putting a few different regimes into place, like longer term strategies. So I'm interested in that, Alex. Sorry for swearing. Well, it's okay. So as for the monetization of the channel, you need 3,000 hours so people can send me super chats. That would be nice. Ed, not Ed. Another guy keeps asking me, "Oh, can I send you a super chat yet?" Not until I get my 3,000 hours. I'm at like 2,300 hours. So I get that, and then people can instead of going on my Patreon, which I know a lot of you guys are, and pay there, you can actually just like pay $5 here, right? And it would help pay for the stupid streaming software I'm paying for, and it's ridiculously overpriced for what I'm getting. That would be cool. But as for the swearing, yeah, maybe I have to dial it down a little bit when I go to apply, because once I reach the first criteria of 3,000 hours, I got to apply for it. And I think I don't know if they do an algorithm check or a manual check. And they're probably going to look to see if I'm advertising friendly, and maybe I shouldn't do like stuff like that anymore. I don't know. I'm not very corporate friendly, I guess. Anyways, so we did the video. We're an hour into this. I don't know what we can do. We can do some financial instability hypothesis. I did talk about that. Who here believes in that? Like, so Steve's idea of the great moderation, and you can counter it with government spending, is that there was a great moderation over many years, and it was really built on private sector debt. And then eventually that debt became so big, and the cost of servicing that debt became a huge cost for productive firms, and then we hit instability. We could touch on that. It gets a little technical, and then I'm pulling up a model, and we're looking at squiggly lines. We could look at the modern macro tech thing. Let's see if I can bring that up. Let's kill this poll, end the poll. Everybody's saying I shouldn't touch on Ed ever again. Sorry, Alex. The people have spoken. Democracy. Hoorah, democracy has spoken. 70% of the people say I should never care about Ed again. They've spoken. Tony, MSN. Microsoft MSN is Microsoft Network. Okay, well, thanks for the clarification there, Tony. Graham, just watch out for music copyrights. Yeah, so I don't know if you've got a YouTube channel, but anytime I put out like a video, it'll flag. Like it's got like all the identifications, even for these reaction videos. So I have to make it a small on the side, and I have to be shown, like I have to significantly change it. I did get one copyright notice. It didn't take down the video, but it said if my channel was monetized, I wouldn't make any money from it. I disputed it and won. But what was triggered is a lot of times is I was putting my face down in the bottom corner, so it just looked like I was playing the video. I disputed and said I was reacting and commenting it to that video, and I had significantly changed it. But that's a big problem. And yeah, copyright music, they're really bad on YouTube. Like they will go hard on you, right? So I've actually purchased, it's another thing I pay monthly money for, is a software program where I have really like a great collection of music that I can play. That's I have the legal rights to play. So there's that. And then with Restream, this platform I use, you know. Anyways, I'm just bringing up a model right now. I'm going to play with the model. That's what we're going to do. Oh, no, I was going to bring up the Modern Macro Technology website. Let's bring that up. Modern macro technologies. This isn't live for the public, but we'll log into it and I'll bring it up. Play around, we can do things. This is kind of like what Dave was showing on Friday with his tax calculator. Just this is like a total non-linear dynamic system. I don't know what version of this is. It's bringing up a few different versions here. No, Doug and I were doing some work there last week on it. It might not be operating at peak capacity right now. Clearly is not operating at peak capacity. Well, let's check it out. Let's check out real output, change. Okay, we got stuff here. Let's share the screen. Share Chrome tab. Get rid of the thing. Get rid of this. Maximize this. Now we can do a few experiments here. So I have generalized. Let's get rid of all these logos and stuff. So generalized. So this is like a generalized business cycle. It doesn't represent any economy, and you can do things to kind of see what like quantitative easing would be. So I could increase the bonds purchase rate to, let's say, 30%, run the simulation. Hopefully we have a live version of this for everybody to use eventually in the future. I don't know if there's this is kind of a beta version right now, so I don't even know how well it's going to work, to be honest. Can we look at another? Let's look at interest rate. Bank interest rate, bond interest rate. Okay, well, this has got some interesting permutation. So I don't know which specific run this is, but this is almost an example. So right now, we've pushed, like, this is a view of bond rates in aggregate, all of them put together in this hypothetical model, and you can see the market permutations that are happening, and then you can see that the central bank is essentially forcing these treasuries down to zero. And so without active intervention, so I've lessened it way down. I can lessen it even more. Without active intervention, the market essentially takes over the bond yields, right, and simulates something. In this case, remember, complex system are endogenous. Well, that's a problem. It is saying you have broken the model. You know what? I should just use the Minsky version. Let's just use the Minsky version. Show that another time. Stop sharing. Let's use the Minsky version. Stand by. Bring that up. Ravel version, I should call it. Model. And let's find one of the good. So this is an old draft version that I had, that I'm okay with sharing. I think this one will do the trick. We could run like a flight simulator. Take a second to load. I might be a bit glitchy for a second. And we'll share this screen. Make it big. So this is the same deal. This is kind of like a raw version of the model. So Right now, it's initial conditions. The policy rate's set to 3, so that's essentially interest on reserves. So the bond purchase rate, the central bank's purchasing 20% of the securities that the commercial banks have. They could, of course, sell them. Government spending to households is at 1% of real output, 5% to firms of real output, and then some tax rates. You can have some shocks. This is a very early version of the model. We could play it out and do some QE if we want to and slow it way down. So essentially right now, everything that's happening in the model is from initial conditions and parameter settings, and it's going to do things along the way, and it's called endogenous behavior, right? The structure of the system generates the dynamics. There's nothing optimized to go into any equilibriums here, right? Nothing at all. Right. And so if you were a neoliberal, you'd be looking at the interest rate saying, well, I've got to keep it around 2%, et cetera, right? You'd watch that go along, play out. So you can do things like QE, and I'll slow it down. And let's say we do some QE. And mechanically, it's pretty simple. So we'll do some QE. Going to say rates are at rock bottom. So this is the policy rate. And of course, it's tied to the interbank rate. And I'm doing some massive QE here. And so mechanically, if you look down at the blue line down here, you'll see it's starting to go up. So there's new settlement balances being created in the system. Total bank deposits are just doing their thing based on economic activities. Speed it up a bit. Right, and that's QE, right? There's nothing fancy about it. And then, of course, you can, okay, I'm going to stop QE. Okay, then you're unwinding. You're going the other way. So we'll slow down the purchase of bonds, say right down to 10%, and we'll actually say, let's sell some back. Let's sell them back. So now we're selling back a bunch. And we'll put the interest rate on reserves up. I don't know, to 3% again. This is like massive QE that I just exaggerated QE there. And so that's just essentially QE. Right? Well, there's something bad just happened. Some sort of shock has just happened. But you'll see, all that's really happening is the balance of settlements, so reserves, is going down in the system. That's going to affect the policy rate to a degree, but it's constrained by discount window lending by the Fed, which is a ceiling, and then interest on reserves, which is a floor. There seems to be a massive collapse here. I don't know what happened to your household. Some sort of crisis was developed by my huge inputs there that were completely exaggerated. Don't know what's really going on. Inflation's dropped. That's great, I guess. Rates, all the rates are going through the roof. So now we're letting the market take over, right? Remember how I said you can just completely control the market with the central bank, or you can let the market take over on its own. Of course, in this case, I end it, I unwind it, the QE, and let the market take over, and market rates went through the roof. Every market rates going through the roof. It's unconstrained. But these are the type of tools that policymakers should be using. Man, this was an old version of this model. Things have changed massively since I first did this. Let's bring them back memories. Bring back memories, guys. Quite the stuff. Let's see if I can recover this economy. So if I just slow this down, see if I can hit a recovery, or have I just caused World War III in this nation? Let's constrain the rates. We are going to... things have gotten out of control. We've got a deflationary spiral. Woo! Oh, the economy's crashed. This is why you don't let Ty Keynes be the central bank head. This is a cool thing about nonlinear systems, since I designed this, right? And so each set of initial conditions and each parameter settings. So the complex systems are very sensitive to initial conditions. So I don't know how each setup will play out, right? But in this case, in 3.5 years, I managed to completely crash the economy. Eventually, we'll have like a web interface for that, so everybody can play with that tool themselves, and it'll be really fun. It'll be a good educational tool for people to play with. Any questions in the chat? I don't know how long I'm going to do this stream today. I've got work to do. I got a day job that I'm supposed to be doing. Involves a lot of research and technical stuff, right? Gonna cover the guy. 30% of you really love Ed. 70% of you don't love Ed. Here we go. Graham, how the hell were economists able to plan the economy without this type of modeling? Well, they never have. If you look back at the two major crises, call them economic crises, you've got an exogenous one, which is COVID-19. And so I've done a lot of, and so the Fed put out this paper. I don't have the screenshots, and they showed how their main DSGE model completely failed to forecast inflation. Ours worked out really good. Theirs did not. They just predicted flat inflation, and then, the next period, they just shocked inflation up and said, well, we're here now. Model was wrong before, but we're here now. And then it showed inflation just returning to 2%, right? Equilibrium, just always returned back down. And then the next one, inflation would be higher. So it completely failed there. So I don't know if they did any planning. And then, of course, 2008, none of the DSGE models saw financial instability, and the basis for that national model is based on a lot of work of Steve's PhD paper in 1997 on financial instability. A portion of it, and of course the model was built around that in a lot of ways, right? That can look at the instability of systems, right? The overshoot and collapse parts of systems. There's no optimization for equilibrium in that model. There's no such thing. You could play with that model. I could have just let it run stable for 30 years. There'd be no straight line equilibrium. You can't ever do that, right? You've got one part of the system imposing an overshoot, another part of the system imposing an undershoot, right? It's completely non-linear, right? You couldn't find in that specific model a point where it went into equilibrium. It would either shoot up into a crisis or down into a crisis and collapse, right? The system would collapse, but you wouldn't ever fine tune it into equilibrium. There's too many variables in that model. Now, there are some models in complex systems you can get what's called a steady state error, right? And so this will happen. Tony will know a little bit about this stuff, like PID controllers. You can have it. So PID controller is you set, let's say, your cruise control in your car, right? So you set it for 100 miles an hour or 100 kilometers an hour, and then then the car accelerates up to that. And if you set your PID controller pretty good, it might overshoot a bit, and then come back and then be in equilibrium with that line. And a small little system like that, you're working towards an equilibrium, a nonlinear dynamic equilibrium. Sometimes you can get what's called steady state errors, right? So you're in this steady equilibrium, but you never close that gap between your setting of 100 kilometers an hour and the car's speed, right? And so you can get errors like that. And economists touch on steady state errors, but I don't think they actually know what that means in a system's perspective, right? But I think maybe because they're like, oh, that's equilibrium. I think they actually think that's a good thing in a system when it's really an error. Anyways, a deal. People plan. Economists just write if the scenario is largely not applicable to real problems. Well, people do plan, right? People do things. Ty, when you want PID controllers explained, let me know. Well, I can bring up a PID. You know what? I'm going to bring up a PID controller. You asked for it. You asked for it, Tony. Let's bring up a PID controller. Research folder. Dynamic models. My models? Done models. PID. Where is it? Where's my PID controller? PID. Hold on. Let me just look for it. I've lost where I... Oh, okay. PID controller. I'll bring it up here. Give me a second. So just for anybody who wants to know, a PID is a proportional integral derivative system, right? So it's using 3 different inputs. I'll bring this up on screen. I don't know if I have the settings right. And this is an example of a dynamic system. I'll move the chat out of the way. I'll make this big. And so I'll slow it down. And so this is a PID controller. You can see the set point is set at 5, and then I've optimized it to reach 5 after. And so these are applied to like cruise controls in your car. They're nonlinear systems. What I'm trying to say is economists do not do this type of modeling, right? They can't even grasp it, right? But this would be the closest thing that I could talk about equilibrium with an economist. I'd be like, well, here's some dynamic equilibrium for you. But you can change the values. So you can see, so this is the proportional controller, the integral, and the derivative. And Tony, you may be fascinated. No, I actually had to work because Ravel, it wasn't designed so well to do the derivative well. So it's using a symbolic derivative where the integral is numerical. And so I had to create this low pass filter and create another integral as like a filter for the derivative. So what this is saying is like you've got your controller, and there's some sort of lag to your controller. So it could be you're like going up a hill in the car and you set your cruise control, right? And the input feeds back into itself, right? And it goes through the 3 controllers right here. So your proportional, your integral, and your derivative, and they all behave in these ways, right? So it's proportionally slowing down the acceleration, the integral, where it's an exponential and then slows down, and then a derivative, right? And they all intermix. Now I can change, let's say if I want to change the proportional down to 1.5, I don't know what this will do. And that seems to just take it a little bit longer. So let's increase to 2.5. And well, that just taken longer. Let's change the integral. I don't know what this will do. Nonlinear systems. And there we go. So we get an overshoot. So this is like if you set your PID controller, maybe you meant to do this. So maybe this is your altitude controller, right? And maybe you've got some downforce downdrafts in I don't know, in the air you're working. So you need to overshoot your altitude, right, to account for the down forces on. And so this is what a PID controller is. And it's really, I love these because this is like the base of controlled complex systems, right? Where you're actually controlling a complex system. And I love this stuff. It's so fascinating. Complex systems is the coolest shit in the world. I just love it. I absolutely love that stuff. And then you, of course, once you start getting those concepts down and you understand what an integral is, right? You know, what is a derivative? So the derivative, so there's a differentiation and then there's integration. And so in system dynamic model or system dynamic programs, you'll see everything written as ordinary differential equations, but they're actually integrated behind the scenes. And integration isn't just measuring the change. Picture a graph and a line. It's not just looking at the change of the line, which can be very unstable. It's looking at the area below the line, right? And that's a lot more stable. So when you're numerically solving things, whether you're using an Euler solver, a first order solver, or you're using a Runge-Kutta fourth order solver, makes it a lot more stable. Whereas differentiation, you're just looking at the change of the line itself, right? And that's kind of the D in the PID controller, right? And that's why I had to use a low pass filter because I was using symbolic. So there's a difference between symbolic and numerical differentiation, and Ravel uses the symbolic version. Anyways, that's what a PID controller is, and those are all over in your mechanical machines and whatnot. And yeah, Tony is an expert on that. So if you ever want to talk to an expert, you know, just reach out to Tony Wilson. Tony Wilson in the chat. Alex, pilots need this when they are turning base. When they are returning to base or turning base. Yeah, they can. Yeah, they can stop overshoot. So if you calibrate it, like so, in the first run when I first opened up the model, I had perfectly calibrated it so it could reach equilibrium, its target point. And of course, at the end, so on the right side of the model was kind of like the mechanical unit that I was representing. And basically, that unit says it gets an input, but there's a delay until it actually reaches it. And so then I used that and fed it into the PID controller. So it was very generalized. It was just a mathematical exercise. But apply that to, like a cruise control, right? If you want faster acceleration in your cruise control to get up to the target speed you want, if your PID controller, and there's other controllers as well, if it's set too fast, it'll accelerate and overshoot. And if you overshoot, then you get a speeding ticket from the police. Right? Right. So you use PID controllers to control that. But in that model there, I wasn't varying the lag in the actual, end part. So if I was doing it dynamically, so the road condition changed, right? Then you'd want to calibrate the PID controller to understand you're going up a hill or you're going down a hill, and then you'd want to calibrate your controller to match that, right? And that's what those are for. And I wish economists would. I wish first year. Jesus, Tony, if we're going to agree on one thing, is that I wish economists would just get into some of these basic concepts, right, in the first year. So, they would even if they never took, the route of mathematical, economics down the road, they would have some basic concepts of a nonlinear system as opposed to, rational expectations, right? So, Alex, turning base is a thing, Ty. Line. Are you a pilot? You sound like a pilot. If you're a pilot, let's go flying, buddy. Come over to Canada. Come to Canada, have some maple syrup, and let's do some flying. I'm not a pilot, so I don't know. Don't know about that stuff. But anyways, those are, I just know the mathematical parts. Oh, Tony's a pilot. Tony's a pilot. Well, geez, fly across the Pacific, refuel in Hawaii, and come to Canada, Tony. Come to Canada. Oh, shit. We're a long way from Ed now. We're a long way from that topic with Ed. We're going to wrap this stream up. Let's just check out how it's doing on X. How you guys doing on X? Couple viewers on X. I still wonder if I can monetize and vape at the same time. That's going to be pretty problematic. Doing these 2-hour streams, like I want to, you puff on the vape kind of thing, right? And, get that going. Feel good about myself. Yeah, I picked the wrong title for this stream. Pissed off the MMTers. Pissed off when I said the BOE's going to go broke. You can tell that was real clickbait. Tony. Great idea, Ty, but would mean economists would need to be mathematically literate to begin with. Well, yeah. Okay. So what I'm saying is the students wouldn't have to they wouldn't have to go to your level, Tony, of mathematical insights, or even to my level, which I think are lower than yours. But they would be taught. So they would have, now they do have mathematicians, if depending on if you're an intermediate macro and stuff. But I would like to see an engineer and a mathematician go in and just show some basic nonlinear systems, right? To get those basic concepts. So if they did go that route of some empirical economics where they're building models, they'd have those base tools where they could then investigate further. Maybe they're at WPI and they decide, you know what, for my master's, I did my undergrad in economics, but now I want to do a master's in WPI. It could be system dynamics, or maybe if they're somewhere else, I want to do my master's in engineering because this is going to be important. And then maybe they finish with a PhD in economics. I'm just hypothesizing, right? So it's just like, you're right. Economists don't have these concepts, but the system could be adjusted. Institutions could, provide macro courses with engineers, right? Or some physicists or some just mathematicians, right? To teach basic stuff, right? To get the ball rolling. And then it would be up to the student if they want to really, go crazy on easier to teach dogs how to fly. So again, I'm not saying we should go and try to reteach. I'm just waiting for all economists to die, like every one of them virtually, except for some heterodox ones. Unfortunately, they are always teaching the next generation some sort of general equilibrium, optimizing. You guys realize like those DSG models, time to them are discrete shocks. So the system gets shocked and it's optimized to find an equilibrium. And then Tony will know about this, about the saddle of equilibrium, right? So if you picture a saddle and you drop a marble on it, right, where it goes. In DSGE models, they can shift that saddle on each discrete period. So there'll always be an optimized equilibrium. It drives me freaking nuts. That's technical, I know. And so basically they create a system where it's not real. Like that's not a real system. Like when you model a system, you have structurally a bunch of equilibrium points. You will have attractors and repellers. And if you look at like the Lorentz systems, then you got strange attractors. But, you know, it's the structure of the system that creates the different equilibrium points. Graham, equilibrium is an essential view of the way the economy operates. Equilibrium is a fantasy of neoclassical economics as capitalism is cyclical like all dynamic systems on Earth. Mr. Minsky. Yes. Now, interesting fact is Hyman Minsky couldn't do math. So he tried to use, when he had a sound theory, and when he tried to prove it, I think he used the Herod growth cycle model to try to formalize it. It never worked out. So like Marx, Minsky was a great thinker, but not so good at math. And it's unfortunate because there's a fellow named Richard Goodwin and Hyman Minsky. They both were teaching, I think it was at Levy. I think it was there, but they didn't get along. That's some of the stories I hear. Now, Mike Radzicki said they were indifferent to each other. So Richard Goodwin was a mathematician. And Richard Goodwin, back in the day, knew Schumpeter. And Schumpeter is like, I will teach you economics if you would teach me math. So Tony, there have been times in the past, and Goodwin was like nonlinear dynamics, like just brilliant. There have been periods in time where this could have been a dominant form of mathematical modeling in economics, but it just didn't take place, right? And back to like Graham, how you're saying neoclassical economics. Well, so conventional economists now, when you call them a neoclassicals, they scoff at you and they're like, no, we're new Keynesian. And what the new Keynesians did is they came along and they understood that, yeah, markets don't clear automatically. You'd have to have a bunch of special conditions in order for that to happen. Right? Like you ignore unemployment. You say money is neutral, right? There's perfect rational expectations, perfect competition. And in that case, you can build a model where markets clear. But the new Keynesians came along and they were heavily critiqued, of course, along the way. And they were like, well, we're going to add frictions. Literally, they called them frictions. And so now they've added frictions to these fraudulent models to make them more realistic instead of building a structurally realistic model. And so that's what they are now. So if you're ever fighting with a neoclassical, you can just say, and I've got my latest blog post on patreon.com/relearningeconomics. It's still paid. It's actually addressing that directly, right? And it's basically, you know, new Keynesian economics is the mask of neoclassical economics, right? So if you talk to a conventional economist, mainstream economist, and you call them a neoclassical, they'll be like, you're so outdated, man. You know, I practice new classical economics or new Keynesian economics. And that's when you can tell them adding frictions to bunk models doesn't change it from neoclassical to realism. It just changes it to the name you've given it, new Keynesian, which is a bastardization of Keynes's name, in my opinion. Just for illustration there, like there is a big difference. And a lot of people will say, well, that's Keynesian economics. And a lot of people will say, well, the mainstream does Keynesian economics because you've got new Keynesianism. That's not the case. So new Keynesianism, the isms, and post-Keynesianism are completely different. So the post-Keynesians are very glued to the original teachings of John Maynard Keynes. New Keynesians, right? That's the synthesis. Holy crap. Talking too much. Dry mouth. I need another coffee. Right? That's the combination of classical economics with Keynesian economics. And a lot would argue, if you asked a classical Keynes subscriber, they would say it is junk, right? You're trying to reach an equilibrium, right? and you've just added frictions to your model. So you've taken an unrealistic modeling technique and you've added frictions to try to make it more realistic instead of starting from scratch and let's say using agent-based modeling or system dynamic modeling and creating a realistic structure. Abstract, as George Box always said, all models are wrong, but some are insightful, right? So a new causally sound structured system that is abstract, that gives endogenous behaviors of the macroeconomic system. So you should see business cycles, you should see crises, you should see the effects of COVID-19 and the lockdowns. If you turn down capital utilization, your model should demonstrate how that crisis unfolded. You should be able to see the financial crisis of 2008, right? And that's a very endogenous one. The system itself created that instability in that crisis. And that's what, economists should be doing instead of trying to keep their core foundations, which are bunk, right, and build on top of it. And what they've done now is they've added frictions, and you can look that up. You can, the great thing with AI now is you can go look up what I'm talking about and go ask AI, is neoclassical economics just new Keynesian economics with frictions, right? And it'll elaborate what I'm talking about, right? So I don't have to start pulling out charts and Greek letters for you. Tony, how do you expect an engineer to explain dynamic systems math to a pack of monkeys who don't even know what to call themselves? Students, I keep telling you that we want to get the new students that come into their first year of economics to have an engineer professor come in, a mathematical professor to come in. They do to a degree, but we want to push like what dynamic systems are and being taught by a professor like Mike Radzicki, right? That specializes in system dynamics, right? Something along those lines. It's just not in the mainstream schools, right? That's what I'm talking about. I'm not expecting professors to turn the heads of other professors. They're a write-off, right? They're a write-off. Like even Steve Keen, my good friend Steve Keen. Love him to death, right? He's stuck in his ways. Like professors get stuck in your ways. Tony, you're stuck in your ways. I'm stuck in my ways, right? There is a point where you can't teach a old dog new tricks. But the young students, right, the next generation, like in other fields, science proceeds one death at a time, essentially. But in economics, the foundations, these fraudulent foundations exist generation to generation. They persist. One of the aspects of that is you can't perform the same test twice. You can't perform a test on like the great financial crisis that probably won't happen again in history in the form that it did in 2008, right? So you can run a test for that point in period in time and model it dynamically, but that specific phenomenon won't happen again, maybe a variation of it. So that's problematic. But essentially, economics should proceed one death at a time as well, and it doesn't. Old things persist. And if you look at it, it persists through the schools of economics. So like Austrian economics, post-Keynesian economics, right? Neoclassical economics, new Keynesian economics, ecological economics, which I think is a little more grounded, just hasn't been flushed out, right? There's so many, feminist economics, right? There's so many different schools, right? And they have these rigid philosophies essentially of how the economy operates, right? And you're fighting ideology there, and I think that might be one of the causes of that. Graham, who needs AI when we have TI? Well, AI can be wrong and I can be wrong, and I'm willing, and I've been wrong in the past, to adjust my thinking, right? One of the ways to do that though is through modeling. And so system dynamics, social systems are really hard because it's soft modeling, right? It's not like the PID controller that's hard modeling. Like if that's applied to a system, right? You have fixed constants, right? You can measure the system. Like in social studies, social sciences, humanities, There's so many terms around the world for it. Obviously, it's a little more softer, but Jay Forster came out and provided us with a tool back in the 1950s to address that, right? And that was system dynamics, right? System dynamics started off with Jay Forster going into GE, General Electric, and they were having these internal cycles, these business cycles that were outside of the normal larger business cycle. And he went in and he said it's the structure of your operations that are causing these endogenous cycles within your business. And it was revolutionary, right? A whole book was written about it called Industrial Dynamics. Well, that spawned a new thing, and this got into the real social aspect of system dynamics, and that was urban dynamics. And urban dynamics was a model and Jay Forrester and his students created that showed urban decay. So different like building programs, job programs, right? Showing that, that a program, some sort of spending program that you thought was good intuitively, your mental model, if you applied that in a city setting, it actually had counterintuitive reactions, nonlinear reactions, like a job program, right? What does a job program really do? I have that model too. I can bring it up. It's quite large. It's one of the largest models I put into Ravel. And so that was urban dynamics. That was the second big leap for system dynamics. And the game SimCity was inspired by the urban dynamics model and the publication, the book Urban Dynamics. What followed urban dynamics was world dynamics and a model called the World 2 model. Right. And this was a whole global system. Right. And at the time, they were facing pollution and the idea that maybe the population would get too big and the carrying capacity of the planet couldn't maintain it. And that was the third big revolution. The fourth biggest revolution for system dynamics was the limits to growth. So out of the World 2 model and world dynamics, people like Dennis Meadows, Daniela Meadows, his wife, Jorgen Randers, came together and made a publication called The Limits to Growth. And I'm sure a lot of you people have heard of it. And it was based on a model called the World 3 model, right? And so those were the dynamics that came out of, system dynamics, right? It was the dynamic itself, right? And these are studying the interaction of humans to physical systems and structurally modeling it. So stock flow consistent, right? And it was all nonlinear, right? And at the time, when it came out, a lot of people were like, this is voodoo. This is like computer science stuff, right? All it was math. All it was math, that its dimensions were consistent. So remember, if you look at a lot of textbook models of economics and you try to do a dimensional analysis on it, it fails, right? And a dimensional analysis is like, if you've got a constant, and let's say it's a time constant, then you're going to dimension that in a year or in the time that you're using. So let's say your model's in years, your dynamic model. Yeah, time constant would be dimensioned as a year. If you've got a bank account, it's dimensioned as dollars. And if you want to find out spending per year, let's say you use a time constant on a bank balance, a bank account balance. So you could go your bank account times the time constant equals your spending. And this is just a very basic equation. And then the flow variable, its units will be dollars per year or dollars per time, right? You try to do a dimensional analysis on a textbook, new Keynesian model, and it'll fail, right? So structurally, these what Jay Forrester did is provided dimensional analysis. He provided stock flow consistency, right? And he's provided endogenous behavior out of the system itself. So when I click a play button, it's giving the dynamics itself. It's generating endogenous dynamics. I don't have to apply shocks to it. Therefore, I can apply shocks to it to explore things like COVID-19 on a national model. But the model will generate, like my national model, will generate a business cycle itself. I don't need shocks to productivity to generate the cycles, right? And so I know I went off there, right? But that is what's been out there since the 1950s. And that's my AI response for you, Graham. I went a long way there. AI broken. Nah. Alex, economics is one of those things best left to self-teaching. Agreed. Those who need to understand it will seek it out for knowledge. You know what? I actually agree with you, Alex. And this is where I say that Alex and I may not agree on everything. But quite frankly, economics itself, we can all admit, is a bunch of different branches of sciences. So I always say, you know, economics is time, space, and mass. So goods and services are moving around the planet through time, right? So there's kind of like the whole physics aspect of it. And of course, if you get into energy, I know Tony's big into that. You've got that. You've got the engineering, right? So an economist will say, well, let's build a factory. An engineer will let's build a structural factory that can expand for output, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a whole engineering part of economics, right? There's the accounting part. So we as much as Austrians, and I love it, they want to say, well, we got to look at the real economy. True. My national model does both nominal and real and combines it both. I would advocate you have to do both. But the way we measure everything is nominally through dollars, right? It's the quickest, fastest way to account for everything. So you got your math, right? So you gotta have that component of economics. So what I'm trying to say is economics itself isn't this like separate science. It's a combination of human knowledge, right? And so if you want to model it, you're going to have insights in engineering. You're going to want to have insights into physics. You're going to want to have insights into math, right? You're going to want to have insights into psychology, right? That's very tough. And in economics, you are not, in an economics undergrad degree, you're not getting that. Once you get to your master's, you're getting a false version of it. And once you get your PhD, you've now become an authority that says this is economics. This isn't physics. This isn't engineering. This isn't psychology. This is economics. Well, that's not the case, right? And this goes back to Alex's input here that economics is best left to self-teaching. At this point in time, even Tony will agree with me. At this point, compared to what's being taught in the academic institutions, you're better off just learning it yourself for what you need. So maybe you're a day trader. Or maybe you're a long-term swing trader like Alex. I think that's what Alex is. Maybe you're one of those, right? So you learn the parts of economics that you need to discover yourself. But as you're doing that, you're probably looking into things like accounting. You're probably looking into things like psychology, human behavior. Maybe you're looking into things like engineering because you want to, you know, buy a company. You want to buy shares in a company that's building new factories around the world. But you got to understand the engineering behind building those new factories to see the potential output in the future. So you got to learn a little bit of engineering, right? And so it's very case specific. And the same with building my national model. I had to learn a little bit of things like PID controllers. I didn't have to become an engineer, but I had to learn things about that, right? I had to learn a little bit about physics, right? And nonlinear dynamics. I had to learn a little bit about math, right? I had to learn a little bit about the structure of the economy, right? I had to learn about accounting, right? So I had to learn specific things to apply it to the things that I needed to apply it to. And of course, if we've taken that model at modern macro technologies and we apply investment strategies into it, which then involves looking at a number of other aspects. And of course, we get into AI and machine learning with our models there. So it's very specific. And it's not to say that, you know, an academic education in economics couldn't be like that, but just right now it's not, right? There is no avenue for a person like Alex who just said, well, a student needs to right away from year one decide, okay, what kind of economics am I going into? Am I going into the psychology of human beings? Then maybe I should be taking credits in psychology in that first, second, and third year, right? And going along, the programs are not dynamic enough to do that, right? And so, again, economics itself is not a distinct field, right? It's a combination of human knowledge. That's what it is. What else do we got here? It's cracking. Tony Wilson. G'day, mate. Good. You guys say cheerio? That's a British thing. G'day, mate. Kangaroos jumping in my backyard. Sorry, Tony. Ty, I did Econ 101 as an option. There is something very valuable looking back. I can now explain what I didn't learn. Okay. What didn't you learn? You learn about the money? What else we got here? You love my energy. Yeah. I'm only on 1 cup of coffee too. Like I kind of slept in today, so it's getting later now. My time. It's almost 12. It's been 2 freaking hours. I'm ending this. Sorry guys, I gotta go. Like I got work to do. It's been great. We discovered it today. It was fun. We're gonna be back on Friday. Steve Keen, Mike Radzicki, Dave Fulks. I've got a topic on hand. Of course, you'll see the live stream, thumbnail, blah, blah, blah. So you'll see that. It's been fun. Make sure you hit the like button, subscribe, hit the notification bell, leave some comments after the video. I know a lot of you guys, even if you don't have a lot to say about the topic, you at least say good show or you say something, right? That helps with the algorithm. I really appreciate it. I see Alex doing it. I see Tony once in a while doing it. I'm sure Graham's done it. All of you, I don't know, a lot of people have done it, right? Even if you're not watching the show live. So I appreciate you guys doing it. Even if you don't have a lot to say, it does help. And I'm grateful for that because you're helping, grow the channel. So it's much appreciated. But yeah, that's about it. We'll see you on Friday.
You are now relearning economics.